hello for everyone that has joined us today. And Fernando, I think you have your presentation ready to go there in a minute. So welcome to everyone who's joining us. This is another in the series of Slide Savvy with Fernando. And for some of you who have either worked with Fernando or you did see his credentials on the invitation that went out. He's a lead pathology assistant at University Hospital in Newark, New Jersey. And we are always thrilled to have him joining us to get insights and teach us more about how we can prepare better slides for pathology to eventually, hopefully, have more organs for allocation. So just a quick administrative, we do have a chat in here where you can enter questions, and we will have plenty of time at the end of Fernando's presentation to address those. And also just a quick note, many of you on this may know that we do have other services. So this is just focused on our what we can help you with slide training and pathology. But we also have radiology and cardiology, 3D volumetrics, and pulmonology. So we are here to help you with all of those, and just reach out to us on the email that'll be at the end of the presentation. So Fernando, all you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Laura, and the entire team. Yeah, today we are in another session. Let me share my screen, and please let me know if you I'm on it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the session for today is as we have in this series, how to prevent certain artifacts. In this case, we choose the Venetian Blind and Shatter artifact that are pretty frequent. And so this series, we started with for the folks that are just joining us today, or for the ones that are following this series, we had the freezing artifact, and we had the crushing artifact, chromatin changes, nuclear holes in the first presentation. And today we're gonna present to you horizontal artifact. So when you study regular anatomy or many of the discipline in medicine, you try to group this by systems, right? By segment, like segmental anatomy. And in this case, we notice that there is a pattern in certain artifact, and this is what we try to group in today's session, and we call that horizontal artifact. Not necessarily the same origin of this artifact, but it's the same pattern that we see in the slides, that we see on the sections. And this is exactly what we're going to do. And then we have a route that we're going to go with webinar 3 and webinar 4. And well, thank you everybody for joining us. And today, treating horizontal artifact. So shatter is this problem that we have in the frozen section and the cryotomy specialty, where actually we can see something that happened when you break glass. And this glass breaks out like in a lot of fragments. And in this context of frozen section, we have something that we introduce in the tissue that is actually there. But when you introduce actually temperature in the tissue, there is ice formation. So that create water ice crystals. And like you said, see this pattern of water ice crystals on that picture to the right is happening inside the tissue, within the tissue, embedded in the tissue. We also discuss about the water content on different samples, from bone, for instance, 4 to 5%, to even brain tissue, other tissues that has a lot of water content. And this actually changes everything because it's introducing this variable. Okay, when we have samples that are sent to us from the OR, we have different media. Most likely, it comes in 9% physiologic solution, which is the saline. And I always recommend that this is on embedded telfa pads, but sometimes it comes soaked in saline. And we have a myriad of other solutions that are supravital solutions that they use in the OR context to recover the organs. And these organs continue, even though there is ischemic time at one point, but still the cells need nutrition. And that's what this supravital solutions are for, but introduced as well because all of them are water-based. And what happened is that we can see the ice crystals and this formation of ice crystals, as they meet the blade with a certain force, they break apart. And then we're gonna discuss how this happened and what is all of these variables or these variables that we introduced in this frozen section equation. The temperature is one of the most important variables because the temperature actually makes this water to go from one state to the other one. From the extremely warm, like a room temperature, remember we received the samples at room temperature, and at room temperature, we have a 70 degrees or 20 degrees Celsius approximately. And now we're gonna make these samples to go at -24 as per the cryostat, and the real sample itself, it goes from -15 to -18, -20. And the transition of the media and the sample itself, the tissue, it creates a lot of crystals. It creates different changes in water. So we need to understand that we have different materials when we are working in this frozen section. One is the embedding media. The embedding media usually is commercially available by the name of OCT. And this medium is the one that prevents, the one that permits to hold the tissue in place. Just like in the regular processing, paraffin holds the tissue, gives us a grab on the tissue. So the tissue is holded right after processing and gives us this handle that we can then have sections. In the frozen section setting, which is something that need to be in certain amount of time, very quick, we have this OCT. That's one of the compounds that we use. A bunch of polyethylene glycols and this media is gonna interact also with the tissue itself. So the tissue itself, human tissue, has different water contents. So we have water contents on the tissue itself. We have the media, which is a completely different consistency, and we have the interface. And if we look at this at a very microscopic level, molecular level, this interaction between these both kind of different substances are going to interact with a third factor, which is the blade. It has its own temperature, it has its own hardness, and that's exactly what we had to balance. And we need to balance this consistency of tissue, consistency of the embedded media, the temperature that is on the cryostat, and how we start sectioning. All of these need to come to a point that we need to have a certain expected temperature, certain expected movement when we start cutting the section, and this is going to give us a section that is without artifact in general. So we divided these different stages of the sectioning, 3 stages basically, and this is something that we pass this knowledge to our residents for so many years with Dr. Stephen Peters, and he called that the crumple stage. The crumple stage is basically when the temperature is going down, is getting there, but not yet. And this crumple stage, approximately -5, -10. And we start having sections, and we're gonna have a video later. You're gonna see that that this is like almost like whipped cream cheese type of consistency. So it's just gonna stay on the blade, and it's gonna have a thickness that is not the desired thickness. And we know that because also the block itself, instead of being white, like most of us technicians out there that are listening to this session know that when the change of color too. So we have a grayish white color, definitely visually that chalk is not at the right temperature. Although if we see a white solid color, most likely this is the temperature that we can start thinking on effacing or trimming the block. So then we go to the ideal stage. How do we identify that the sections are in this ideal stage? The first thing is when we after we efface, after we trim the block, we're gonna see the section is going to be flat. You're gonna see the section that slides onto the stage and is perfectly flat. And the other thing indirectly is that this section remains flat. It's very important. Folks out there that are listening and that are facing these frozen sections every day in the organ transplantation field, please make sure that when you start facing the block, when you start cutting, and if you see the first or second sections that you're taking now at 5 microns, make sure that the sections are coming flat on the stage. If you see that, most likely the temperature that you're cutting is ideal for sectioning. Now we're gonna go to the crunch stage. This is something that I call the crunch stage because you can hear actually how the section is coming and how the ice crystal formation start meeting the blade, and you can hear the section. Basically, it's like listening to something and you start having this crunch sound coming from the block, and you even can see if it's too cold, even shatter right out of the block. Not necessarily a microscopic level, you can see the shatter of the section of the tissue itself. So usually it goes to -23, -22, and even lower temperatures for this scramble stage. Remember that -17, -18, something I want you to remember. Okay, we have a video here, and I took the video just to show the different temperatures that we have, for instance, on, and that's something that it was just taking out, that the sample look is -12. Now that's the stage, and I want to stop by there, because the stage is like really hot, and then I realized, what is this temperature coming so hot? It's because that plate is actually not connected to the entire, it's kind of floating. When you put a blade, there's no blade there yet. When you put a blade and you connect the blade, that plate that is going to go to the tissue is affixed to the main stage, and then by the temperature actually is going to be transmitted through that, but right now it's not. But then look at now the temperature, and you can see the temperature right there where the sample is going to go. That's why I said in the previous slide, remember -17, -18, because this is the ideal temperature that is happening. And very unfortunately, I don't have the temperature in the back of the cryostat. The back of the cryostat, the temperature was in -23. But the stage is at -17.9. And this is exactly what I would try to do. I don't know if this is something that it will be of help to have in the setting, but definitely this, it can be really realized by practice. You can practice the sectioning and you will see that, but the ideal temperatures range between -17 and -18, even -19 degrees centigrade. Okay. And now in this, I just want to say and show you how, in this case, this chuck was placed in the cryostat, but it was not at enough temperature because we plaster the chuck. Sometimes the tissue and the interface that we were talking, it leaves a space because the OCT and the tissue itself don't connect immediately at the flat level of the embedding plate. And the embedding plate, the temperatures might be different. The OCT temperature is different. That's why we recommend to have a pre-chill OCT. It's extremely important. Very good to have a pre-chill OCT. But you don't have, like in this case, we didn't have that pre-chill OCT. We ran out of that in the fridge, and we only have available around. So it created a space between the tissue and you'll see the folks that are doing kidney biopsies, wedge kidney, wedge livers, sometimes there is a space in between. So we use a technique called plastering. This plastering is just like we just spackle in the wall, you know, for when you are doing the sheetrock, similar to that. You spackle this and you kind of seal that because we need this handle. We're not gonna waste tissue. So right now we're using one of these heat extractors to plaster this and to make sure that this temperature of the surface that we add this OCT is at the same temperature. We use that heat extractor. And you can see the plastering. And now the tissue is right at the edge. Okay, so this is just to show how these sections are made. Speaking of that section, and then will be placed in the fixative immediately. And now we have another example of how the temperature actually changed everything. And then to the left in this, in the picture A, we have a little holes around the sample. And as we introduce heat, we use the pump, to introduce heat on the sample. And immediately, this transfer of heat melts the ice crystal formation. And now in picture B, the same section, but with the variable of some heat, then you don't see the same problem. That's why it's important to manage and to practice this so we get the right temperature. And you can identify this visually. You don't need a temperature gun to see when you're going to cut this. Remember, we have an ongoing process, and this is a process the OR is waiting for our results. So we don't have too much time actually for measurements and go through scientific, but we can be observational in this case. And our muscle memory can identify when, like in the left slide, is crumpling and start having chatter, and how in the right, after we introduce a heat, this is not there anymore. Now, in these samples, this is an extreme presentation, an extreme showing of how ice crystal formation can affect the blood. This is the same tissue. This is a leiomyoma. And look how at minus 35, at minus 25, at minus 20, at minus 18, the amount of shatter and ice crystal formation is completely different. And this is important because this is telling us how this process happens as the temperature is also changing in the cryostat. And other thing that we had to remember is the consistency of tissue. So within the same tissue, let's say in this case is a renal tumor, actually kidney, and this kidney happened to have a renal mass, cancer mass. And so it's the same tissue. We're cutting at the same temperature, but you can see on the right here how this tubular structures and kidney itself, parenchyma, is it doesn't have any shatter. It's actually perfect temperature. But then you can see into the left that the same case with this right temperature and everything is creating the shatter. So the shatter is happening here, and then in this picture to the left is, assuming it's a higher power that you can see. It's happening because actually it's the water content. So tumors and renal and in general and cancers, they have a lot of apoptosis, they have a lot of necrosis, they have inflammatory processes going on, and it just isn't. Cancer cells just don't behave in the way regular normal cells on this individual have. So there's also an increase in circulation, edema, local edema. So the water content in general is higher than in the normal kidney, although this kidney is filtrating urine, but it's still, if we cut at the right temperature, we won't have the shattering. But in these cases, tissue is sick, and because of that characteristic, as we can see shatter even in the same. This is something that will give us an idea how even the same tissue can behave in different ways, and how intrinsic morphology, intrinsic characteristic of the tissue, like let's say granulomatous tissue, let's say microcalcifications, can affect the frozen section as well. So then we're gonna do another horizontal artifact that happen frequently. And it's also known as shatter or stutter, because you can see these synchronous, repetitive, wavy sections on the slide that happen quite frequent. And like I mentioned before, sometimes happen due to the nature of tissue. Like sometimes we have microcalcifications. It's more uniform because these microcalcifications, these granulomatous characteristic of the tissue is actually a global appearing. It's not a focal, so meaning focal in one area, but it's more like a global thing on the entire tissue. So that's why we can see this pattern of Venetian blind artifact, chatter. And if it goes in this more repetitive, more synchronous way. And also I think when there are overcooled blocks, when something is really, really cold, it can happen as well. But this pattern also happened for the folks that are working in the field, for the technicians actually. And when we have to the last, one of the last slides, I think we're gonna talk about TRM, which is the technician resource management, and how this actually can prevent from happening when it's not related to the nature of tissue, the OCT, the temperature, the water content, and many of these variables that are involved in this. And the reason is because we have in the cryostat moving parts. It's a lot of bunch of moving parts, but some of these moving parts are not supposed to move during the sectioning. So it means that these moving parts are moving when they're not supposed to be, and they creating this Venetian blind effect as well. This is an example of the thickened thing. We're going to back to that. And then the top. I want you to focus on the top. Okay, so that's in this sample, you can see how the section goes, and you see how flat it is too. There's a little holes there. It's not tissue, but you can see the top. The top is really thin. It's thinner than the bottom, as you can see. And another thing important here in this slide, you can see the shatter here. It's really bad shatter here. And also, you can see what I said. Remember that the ideal temperature, we can actually observe the ideal temperature. Look how immediately you take the section, we're taking this section right there, and look at the technique, how you, with the brush, really barely touching the corner. And then you can see how immediately it curls, because this is not the right temperature. So we know this is too cold, okay? Another something that we need to see, because all of this that we studied before, we have some settings in the cryostat as well that we need to make sure they are standard, or we follow this settings. And one is the angle. So it means the angle of the blade, okay? It doesn't have anything to do with the presentation, where the chuck is. There is also a head where the chuck goes, that you also can change the angle, but you can change the angle in all of the axes. But the stage itself has something at the bottom that changes the angle of the blade. It means that how the bevel of the blade meets the tissue. And then you can see in this part, the blade, this is a more obtuse angle. This is 5 degrees. This is 5 degrees. Stress that we would like to have 5 degrees as a standard. And at the moment is sectioning the sample. This is the tissue, also embedding on OCT, two consistencies, remember. It gives you a section that is like more like a shaving, like more uniform shaving, very delicate shaving, as you can see, remember on the pictures, in the videos, you can see how the shaves immediately. And this is 5 microns. 5 microns, which, just to remind you, is a millimeter divided in 1,000. And this is the thickness are we cutting. So moving parts cannot be allowed at this extremely tiny, minuscule, thin section, right? Thickness. This is just, if something is moving and they're not supposed to move, like the blade is moving, supposed to move, the sample is supposed to be affixed, but then the sample perhaps is not well fixed on the top of the chuck, so it's gonna move, and it's gonna give us a problem. In this case, 5 degrees here, this angle, and the section will be just a nice, beautiful shaving. But what happens if we have a different angle? If we have an angle of 7 or 8, 10, or we have moving parts. So this is exactly what happened. So the blade is going to start jumping because the presentation of the blade is not in this angle of shaving. The presentation of the blade is more on a towards the 45 or 90 degree, exaggerating that, of course. So the blade is going to start jumping. And that's what we see, that pattern, that wavy pattern on the sample. And the section obviously is going to have this wavy pattern as well. This is one of our cryostats last week that was, we were having problems with this and we couldn't figure out what is that. So we kind of did everything we had to do in our part, but then we had to call preventive service, and it was ice formation due to, normally these machines have a thawing cycle at night, so they go kind of off. So there is a time that they actually defrost. That's what it's called, defrost cycle. And so this ice, this water, basically, it goes to a receptacle, so certain used by gravity. But sometimes this ice formation, because it's not enough the time that is going to this into this cycle. And that was one of the reasons. But then we continue having problems. Like it was, you see that it was the consistency here. We're cutting this part is quite acceptable. All of a sudden, we don't have anything in the center where the sample is, and then we go back, and then the sample we have as well. We have again part of the sample, but you see that it's thick and thin. Sorry. And then the center is so we call service again, two different thickness anyway. The bottom was thicker, like and so then we need to find out what's going on with it. It has to be the equipment. It's not the technician. It's not the sample itself. We need to figure out that something is wrong. And then we call service again. And what happened is that this plate, the plate that we have here in many cryostats, it has a rod that goes all the way down. But this rod, I kind of, keep this blade secure. This is a low profile, by the way. We have high profile and low profile blades. They behave different too. And then we had to adjust the blade, the angle also related to the blade. While high profile blades need a little, more angle, like maybe 6 or 7. Low profile blades, we prefer that in 5 or 6. Okay, this is something important to note as well. If you're cutting with a low profile, you're cutting with a high profile blade. In this case, we usually use low profile. We like that. And what happened is that this rod that goes and secures the stage, it has 2 springs. One of these springs was broken. And then that's what is important to identify the problems. It's part of the theorem as well. Okay. Okay. So high profile, we said that already. So we going to this part that we also we're stressing a lot of this, and thank you, Compumed, for being advocate of this standardizing and the surgical pathology in this particular part of the surgical pathology, which is the frozen section, the cryotomy world. And this is something that we had to spread this knowledge about the technician resource management. There's nothing new about that. We didn't invent that, but if we standardize the process, it's going to be easier for everybody, not only the people in the field, but the people also in management, the decision-making people, to identify what the tools these people in the field need and how this tool group of people, the decision making and the people in the field, need to communicate and need to be constantly in touch, knowing the needs of each other and what is going on, because it's extremely important for the outcome. for this kidney section, for this liver section, right? This liver biopsies that we're having problems in performing these frozen sections, people need to know. So the first and most important part of this is training. And it's something that, since I'm working for CompuMed, is something that we spread. We're really strong in training, and we want everybody trained, and we need everybody trained. So in that way, everybody's talking at the same language. This effort of these seminars, these presentations that we're doing, is exactly because we wanted to have the knowledge first. And then we're going to trigger of this knowledge, the curiosity of people. Like, why is this happening constantly? Like, how we can improve this process in my lab? We're using low profile blades. We're using high profile blades. We're using this particular OCT. And the time of staining, there's going to be another presentation, and many other things. So training will assure that well-trained technicians will identify problems even before they occur. For example, abnormal temperature. If you see your cryostat and you see condensation on the glass in front, wow, that's immediately something that is going to prompt, okay, my compressor is failing. It is something wrong with this. Condensation, like I say, cryostat settings, the blade angle, important. Thickness. Somebody was cutting at 6 or 7 microns for whatever reason. We actually tell nobody to move anything, but sometimes in different settings, fatty tissue cuts better at 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 microns even. Even there is a lot of superposition of cells, you can obtain more tissue. But going back, somebody moved it or set the thickness a different thickness. And it's something that you need to be the first group of people coming to work every day. Make sure your cryostat is in well working order. Identify problems on the go. So now we're cutting the frozen section. We have the liver section, we have the liver cores, we have the kidney wedge, and we start cutting, and something happened to this. So that it's just not cutting well. It's giving it shattering, for instance, or maybe thick and thin. Everything that we discussed. It needs to trigger immediately in our technicians, well-trained technicians, that we need to do something. And that something sometimes is stop the process. And sometimes even trigger other actions, like more immediate actions, like, okay, so the blade, maybe the blade is the problem. We have thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars in these surgeries, and a blade costs $1 or $2. So sometimes the blade is the culprit. And I'm gonna try to see if for the next presentation I have an example of that, and then you can see the blade. But the blade, I just put the blade a few times and so on, but the sample was not at the right temperature. Remember the crumble stage. So we start cutting, we detect it's not good, but guess what happened underneath the blade? There is tissue right here underneath. And there is also OCT that now, after a couple of seconds, now it's frozen. So what happened is this underneath blade is still, kind of washing our section and causing problems. And so then immediately you had to think, okay, let me change the blade immediately. Or sometimes even you had to change to another cryostat. We also advocate that if possible for our OPOs to have always like a backup cryostat, just in case one fails. I mean, the other one is always available, and we can continue the section just, to save the sample and to continue with the procedure. And now we're going to the decision making and the technician level, that what is the best course of action. Like sometimes I had to, like I said, change the blade and use the backup cryostat and stop the procedure. So it's always good to stop and think what's going on and identify the cause. If we know something is not going right as we want it to be, then it's time to stop. And like I always said, we're a group of 3 PAs and my workplace. It's always, some people have more experience. Some people are like more younger and they don't have the same experience. But I said, we are leaders, because one day you're going to be by yourself and you have to lead. And we have the residents in training. So the residents in training need to be led by the knowledge of sometimes other professionals, not necessarily people with some experience, sometimes is the person who are you working with has to be a leader and need to take decisions. So one of the most important decisions that I said in leadership that is sometimes hard is ask for help when you know you need to ask for help. And other part of this TRM is good communication. Communication is extremely important. We have to communicate horizontal and vertical communication, horizontal with our peers. And for the next shift, for instance, I have problems cutting the blade, the holder is not working, the angle, there is something wrong with the cryostat. So we pass this to the next shift. And also for the decision making at the managerial level, that we need to have perhaps a different schedule of preventive maintenance. Some places are yearly preventive maintenance, and perhaps we need to have a 6 months preventive maintenance, because the preventive maintenance is going to discover and is going to find out many things. While one cryostat, that's what I always said, have two cryostats. One cryostat is being maintained. Then this cryostat is going to be unplugged. It's going to be at room temperature. Parts are going to be fixed. Perhaps barely working parts are going to be changed as well. And many other things. So it's out of service for at least 6-8 hours, or maybe one day to another if there is a problem like a compressor broken. But we have the backup cryostat. So, but this is decision making for management. And this is a good example of good communication. So I just want to give the credits to Dr. Peters, and a lot of the information that is presented to you is his book. And I also want to say thank you so much to the Compumed team, because this presentation and the way it looks like and so beautifully and professionally presented to you is by this Compumed team. I cannot say more thank you to Levi, to Mark, to Lee, to Laura, and CJ, and everybody else that is involved. And thank you so much for everything. And then we have a question. How to see the blade angle
I'm
on a
back
pretty.
on. So
Yes.
back at you, Fernando, on the thank yous and all of that, because we've stepped up so much the level of slide presentation, preparation, and because of your work and your mentor, Dr. Peters, who we loved working with too. So it's a great team effort. So we do have some questions, and the good news is there's not too many technical terms, clinical terms that I can't pronounce this one.
But I want to first answer this one, the angle, the predia. So these are pictures of the angle. No, it's okay. It's the angle of the predia, and different machine that we have the predia. Then we have also the Avantic cryostat. Both are similar, and then the Leicas that have been there forever, and everybody knows. So this is the stage, and this is the part of the angle. It's located to the left. I got these pictures. It's located to the left, and then the lever, you pull it towards you, and then that's how you lose the lever, and how you adjust is just going away from you. Now, something I noticed that because we have an Avantic cryostat, last week we have one of our cryostat, actually the one I was telling you, the compressor busted, and basically we had to have a loaner, and they give us this Avantic cryostat similar to the Aprilia. And then I noticed that the angle is starting 6. So and we say 5 is the standard. Look, you can, with a millimetric ruler, you can do that. So the next millimetric equal distance will be 4. I'm not saying that this is ideal, but it's better than just calculating 5. And if it's not possible, you still can't cut it at 6. It's not a big deal. But that's how the Aprilia cryostat angle can be set. Okay, so go ahead, Laura.
Oh, no, that's great. So anyway, so a couple more questions for you. So the first one is, so if you have a kidney with a tumor, how can you get the sample to have no shatter effect with both? Or do you have to create 2 slides, one for evaluation of the kidney and one for evaluation of the tumor?
And ideally, well, okay, so the OR comes, and then they know by radiology, right? Most likely radiology or many other means that there is a possible mass, right? This is the case. In this case, it's not a cystic or complex. It's just a solid mass, but it could be a lot of things too, even benign. We know that. So and they take sample of this mass as well, because obviously will not it will not be the ideal candidate then for transplant. In order to avoid that, well, first we gotta focus on the healthy part. So and then that chatter really is gonna crumple my diagnosis. Like it's gonna be so much chatter that it's gonna be so difficult for me to say, okay, so this is a clear renal carcinoma, or the types of maybe a metastasis, for instance. For example, a metastasis also can go to the kidney, and that obviously is not good. Morphology will be the key. And in order to produce maybe a better sample, maybe the temperature is gonna be a little, it's gonna be warm. We're gonna use more like warm up the sample, warm up the sample itself, and perhaps warming up more. Maybe it's gonna give us a thicker sample, because remember, if we are warming up the sample, then the samples are gonna be thicker. But still, we have some sections with the right thickness, and we can evaluate the normal morphology. But right now, the focus in this case will be the tumor. Is a benign tumor, is a malignant tumor. And if we're not gonna make a diagnosis of, saying the stage or type of tumor, but definitely we can see if malignant yes, malignant no, like is the purpose of frozen sections. You can add heat and see if the next sections, and I always recommend 2 sections, are gonna be with less this shattering, and introducing heat will melt this edema, this water content within the tissue, and perhaps give us a better idea or a better frozen section. Also, I can say, but the tumors are actually, unless are quite microscopic, there's gonna be a lot of tissue around surrounding, like you say, cancer yes or cancer no. In this case, it won't crumple the diagnosis really.
Wow. Thank you. I think there's a lot to build on that one, almost its own webinar right there, Fernando. Okay, our next question. How often should a cryostat receive preventative maintenance? Since in the OPOs, the DCUs, we typically do stat cases. Is there a way to typically test the equipment at some frequency? If so, how should we perform that?
Well, really, the preventive maintenance is something that usually, and for instance, in our setting, is done every year. We have a yearly preventive maintenance, which includes a technician putting down this machine, taking apart absolutely everything, and checking every single part that need to be replaced or changed, including the motherboard, including electronic parts, right? So every year seems like a good time for that. You can set up also every 6 months, and I don't see anything wrong. But it's also depending the people who can identify problems. We do it every year because we know these cryostats more or less up and down, inside and outside. So every time I have a problem, people come to me and say, "Hey, blah blah blah." I say, "Okay, let's fix that, and let's try this. Let's do this." So you have this kind of first approach. So immediately, and now it also comes to the question, like how many times actually that happen a year? Well, I will say that per cryostat, we have at least 10 interactions with the company saying, giving a service because things go wrong. But if you have a setting where your technicians or people in the field, they're not like kind of too connected to this knowledge, and they are doing all the tasks and just cutting frozen sections, for example, I would say every 6 months will be a good idea to have that. And then the basic training of the technicians will identify small problems that can be fixed either by them or maybe with a short visit of your preventive maintenance company. But every 6 months sounds like a good plan, especially the people that don't perform too much or maybe don't have too much experience to identify these problems.
Okay, I'm gonna jump a question because I think it goes back to your other one earlier. It says, how do you add heat? Is it a device? And if so,
Okay.
suggested.
Yeah, we kind of add heat to this using really our thumb or our palm. Now, having a blade next to us it's quite not the ideal. But I assure you that in these 22 years that I'm doing this, I never caught myself doing it. And you use your thumb directly to the sample. And I usually tell my residents to count. If it's too cold, to count until 10. And if it's not that cold and you see little lines going on and little shatter going on, to count until 5. And that's what I do. You can use the part of your palm as well, but you kind of put more of your body there. So a thumb is just good enough to warm up this. I know in the book of Dr. Pierce discussing that you use another means like introducing something like a warm pack of gel, something that is at room temperature, and you just put it there. And obviously, is the transfer of heat to the other object will reduce the temperature. But in my practice, in my daily doing, I prefer to use a thumb. It's easier. Sometimes I move the thumb around, and in 5 seconds or counting until 5, that will that will suffice for me to introduce some heat to the sample and melt these ice crystals. Yes.
Okay. So this next one, I think you kind of answer, or we can help because you just referred to it is how do I purchase the technique guide? I think it's Dr. Peter's technique guide.
Oh, the guy that Dr. Peters is on a PDF and online. You can have it in Amazon. I ordered the book itself in Amazon. You can order that in like electronic format. I think Amazon as well for this Kindle device, I believe, and also is in the Apple Store. What is that? The iStore, I think is the.
Maybe we'll talk to the powers that be at CompuMed and send that information out with a follow-up on this. How's that?
Yeah, it's out there.
Yeah, because it is great. So does CompuMed offer training and are set up for OPOs that want to have their own frozen section process?
Say it again.
Does CompuMed offer training and set up for OPOs that want to have their own frozen section process?
Yes, definitely. We're there in the field helping our technicians in a 1 or 2 day session and different shifts. If they have different shifts, we were right there with them and literally holding hands with them because this is a muscle memory process. So you need to know how to turn the wheel. You need to know how intensity of turning the wheel, especially in the first facing or trimming the block, and so on. So it's something that we've done before, and then we do a lot. And in my particular experience, I've been that with the residency programs at Rutgers or UMDNJ, UMDNJ for the last more than 17 years. Yes.
Wonderful. So being in the OPO world, how can we get hands-on training for our techs? Well, I can help with that one. So at the end of the webinar here, there will be our email address. Either you can just send it to sales@CompuMed Inc. There's also a QR code, and we will follow up with you right away and help get that set up for sure. Because we do offer it, and Fernando is definitely part of that. So it's a great program. Here's another one that you and I can probably co-answer together. It says, I'm assuming CompuMed also offers pathology reading services as well. Also, does CompuMed offer a way to digitize the frozen section so we can share them with their pathologists and transplant surgeons? So I'm going to answer the first part, and you can pick up the clinical since I'm not clinical. Actually, we offer really great pathology services. We have on the liver, we have a 30-minute turnaround time. We have quite a few existing OPO customers that we can give you referrals on, and they can tell you how the process works. I think one of them is on the webinar right now, as a matter of fact. And we have pathologists 24/7, 365, and they are from very credentialed universities, including USC and a couple down in Texas. And then in the kidney, we have a 1-hour turnaround time. So we are pretty close at getting every single one of those, our run rate on that. And we also have the ability to provide you some, I would say, quality reports on a monthly basis. So if your techs are doing these in the DCUs, we can provide that. And Fernando actually reviews these and will provide some more detailed follow-up and feedback on it. So, and then, Fernando, I'll let you offer the way to digitize the frozen section so we can share it.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, the word was introduced a while, the digital pathology, and we have a state-of-the-art scanners that allow us to in real time send scans to our pathologists remotely, and actually a company may provide with this state-of-the-art equipment. And this is really simple, easy, basic to use. There is no much a science of this, but obviously there is a training that we provide with, and troubleshooting, and how to get the best slides, not only on the slide itself, but also through the scanning process. And this scanning goes to the cloud and immediately is being read. And we have an extensive database of scans, right? And digital pathology as well. And so extensive, so good that I just want to take the opportunity to thank to Dr. Steve Relich. We have this great interaction, and there is so much goodness going on, because there is actually studies that are on the way, and great ideas to improve this in the setting, but also in, studies that will give you a better knowledge, more in-depth knowledge about the frozen section itself. Is something that they probably at one point they will be known by everybody, but it's ongoing. And this is part of this database, and this is part of this state-of-the-art equipment that we have, and as well of the knowledge that we can share with you today. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and to add on to that, Fernando, just so everyone knows that may not know, it's the Grundium scanner, so that we provide out in the field. And as far as the training on that, yes, we can do all the training and set up on that. And you triggered another thought, and I can't remember what it is, so I will think about it in a minute. I think there's one more question in here, and this is more of a clinical. What would likely be the resulting inaccuracies in pathology interpretation as a result of Venetian blind and shatter effect? And so, like, what, in other words, what's the resulting interpretation bias?
Well, in this setting of the frozen section, morphology is extremely important. So if something is in disrupting this morphology, definitely we're going to have, as all other artifacts. It's not only that. Remember, we have in the previous session other artifacts as well. So it's far from ideal. Now, how much is the problem? Imagine that we have this sample that it has so many lines, and I've seen it before, that and it's so much shatter that it's impossible to read. So the answer is, like, it can ruin completely the frozen section to the point that it's unreadable. It's completely unreadable. It's not usable for diagnostic. Not even trying to see if, certain areas, because you are actually trying to examine as much as tissue as you can, cover as much as tissue as you can, so you can see if certain areas that are more, like, let's say, more deeper to the medulla, but you're gonna see more arteries, for instance, and superficial to the cortex, maybe less. But sometimes these areas are so global and then distorted by this Venetian effect, or maybe perhaps by the shatter, which is, the one that ruins completely the frozen section, that renders completely unreadable and not usable at all.
One more question, and it is, how can I tell the tissue, if the tissue, specifically kidney and liver, are in good hydrated state? And does the fat content, especially liver, make a difference in this water content?
It's something that at one point when I was working with a Perio scanoscope, and there were some algorithms that allow you to know the fat content, actually, using certain algorithms, and to see, because steatosis really looks like empty cells, right? And I was working on it, and I was thinking myself, like, how that impacts that really in the outcome and the detection, because we know fatty tissue or fatty in general, it doesn't show in the slides at -24. You need -70, -80, liquid nitrogen, so on, to make sure the fat shows in the scan, and then obviously fat in between, but actually it does not happen in that way. Does not impair the amount of fatty tissue inside the liver biopsies actually, and kind of prevent this to happen. So frozen sections of fatty tissue are not that base, even though you have abundant steatosis, and the sample macro microsteatosis. So really, it does not affect. What it really affects, actually, and it's something that case is more pertinent to say, is when you receive, for instance, a kidney wedge, and we know that we have the Gerota fat surrounding, right, the capsule, which sometimes normally comes with a little bit of it, and we don't trim this fat. Well, that's going to be a huge problem, and the technicians out there know that, because if you put the blade that is facing the fat, and you don't put it either perpendicular or in the other way, you are going to really section the blade, the fat, and the fat is going to completely wipe out the section out of yours. So it's extremely important to trim the fat out of a wedge, especially for kidney. And liver, no, because the Gleason capsule really is a really thin layer of peritoneum that does not really interfere on the section. And the depth of this, plus the the architecture of the liver is a little different. While the kidney has different like zones, it's not happening in the liver itself from superficial to bottom. It's not a problem itself, but in the kidney, having fatty tissue surrounding it is a problem for the cutting of sections.
Okay. Well, I think this next question may be its own webinar also, but we'll just briefly, because we're getting close on time here. Is the biopsy type needle or wedge more susceptible to these horizontal artifacts? And I think some of this ties into that conversation we're having with Dr. Rudick at Donor Alliance, correct?
Yes. Basically, artifacts are more prone to happen in when the tissue is thinner, smaller type of thing. So in this case, core biopsies always gonna be gonna suffer of these artifacts, not only the Venetian blind effect or maybe a shattering, but most important thing is gonna happen the freezing artifact, because it's so small tissue actually presented, and the temperature is gonna really fluctuate on this skinny sample, less than 1 millimeter of thickness. So that's I always said that I will always advocate for wedges in general are better for the pathologists from the point of view, are better for our technicians, because we have a lot of tissue to cut and we are not gonna exhaust anything, and they're not as traumatic as many people think it is in the setting of collecting the sample itself.
Okay, good. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here, and I feel like I'm on a podcast or producer, because I got a little text reminder that CompuMed does provide the book that we were talking about earlier when we do the training, and we can help out with that. So we want to thank everybody. I forget the date, Fernando, of the next one, but we do have one scheduled, and we'll include that with the recap of this. And so everybody can put that on their calendar. I think we have 4 more this year of the series slide Savvy with Fernando. That's a tongue twister right there. And again, if there's any questions, we're here to help you, and more training, the other ologies that we do. I know we're very focused on pathology here, and we love to help you.